kick it off, I really want to hear about what's your earliest kind of memory of tech, and kind of take us way back.
I think my earliest memories we got a computer at home, and it was a black and green screen. I couldn't even tell you what the make or model was.
And this is in WA.
This is in Perth, where all good people come from. We had it had this Snoopy game on it that was sort of a bit like Donkey Kong, in that like Snoopy had to jump over things. And I just remember now that it just went so slowly. Like you'd press the button and it'd go, but like it actually was very cool.
Yeah.
But that's my very earliest memory of you. That's what.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you studied like programming and went to university in Chomp linguistics as well.
Yeah, so I was actually really lucky to go. So I went to an all-girls school in Australia, a private school, and when I was year 5, I went there. And at the time, we had this principal who was just sort of this phenomenal woman who was like, look, all our girls need to learn programming, which was pretty, this was a long time ago because I'm very old. So this was a very, novel idea back then. And so I literally had a programming class once a week from year 5 through to year 10, which I think is, even now, it's rare, right? And, it wasn't the most advanced stuff in the world, but there was a lot of sort of, then you could go and do a bunch of elective stuff, and the teacher would give me extra things to do and that sort of thing. So, and I honestly think that if I hadn't had that, like literally it never really occurred to me to do programming except as like a tool. So I sort of thought, I better sort of tack on the comp sci degree because it'll kind of make me employable, but I never really thought I am a computer scientist as such. And it's funny because, of course, out of my 3 majors, this is the one that I've ended up...
Pure mathematics.
Pure math and linguistics, yeah. And so this is the one that I've ended up, actually doing everything with. And it's the one that I sort of prioritised the lowest when I was actually at uni. So.
And did you go straight to working at Telstra then?
Yeah, so I got... normal degree in Australia is 3 years. I did this extra major sequence, basically, so it took 4. And so between years 3 and 4, I had applied for this scholarship from the Telstra Research Labs, which existed back then, because I'm very old. They had like a work experience program thing that like a sort of a summer internship as such, during that summer. And so I did that, and then I did my last year of uni, and I moved to Melbourne at that point because I was like, wow, Melbourne's really great. Shout out to Melbournians. They sort of said at the end of that, like, go finish your last year of uni and then come work for us. And I was like, okay, you mean you will pay me money to do this? Like, I sort of had always thought maybe I would just have to work in academia and be poor forever. And it turned out people would really pay me. It still sort of blows me away to this day.
And then from there, did you go to 3Jam? Was that in Australia, or is that when you first came to Valley in 2007, 2008?
So I had been at Telstra for like 4 or 5 years, and I was pretty not super happy. But I was I'd been promoted, surprise, surprise. And I had been sort of promoted, and I was sort of in middle management, but I was really young, and I was like, it wasn't the easiest thing, when I was looking around for new jobs, everyone was sort of wanting me to like start all at the bottom again, and I didn't really know kind of what to do about that, and I was young and inexperienced. And I had this mentor at the time who was like, a really good way of sort of changing careers is to go and do an MBA. And he said, don't go to America because they take too long and it costs too much. Go to INSEAD in France because it's only a 1-year program.
Did you go there?
No, so So I had applied to go there. I got in and I'd like paid my deposit, and I was literally like 2 months away from getting on the plane. Like I'd given notice at work and everything. I was like, guys, I'm leaving. I'm going to this MBA program. And I suddenly had this like quarter-life crisis thing where I was like, I'm just going to go do this, and then I'm going to be back at a big company, or God forbid, in management consulting, and I had a bunch of friends who were management consultants and working 80-hour weeks and completely miserable. And so I said, well, I'm going to not do that, despite the fact I've just paid my deposit and given notice. And so, you know, if I'm going to give up a year of studying in France, I better do something like equally ballsy and cool. And so I just said, well, I'm going to go get a job in Silicon Valley. I don't know why I thought that that was a good idea without even coming here. I'd never been here.
Wow.
You know,
not even to go, you know, have clam chowder.
No, like I'd never been here. I've been to America, but I'd never been to anywhere in the Bay Area. And so I just sort of looked on Craigslist and did interviews on Skype, and someone offered me a job. I mean, it's crazy actually now thinking about it. Someone offered me a job, and then at 3Jam this was, and then I got on a plane. And then I moved here.
E3 visa?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I remember because, you know, it was this tiny startup, there was maybe 10 people. And the visa interview, you know, the visa guy is clearly used to getting the packet that the lawyer puts together that's like this thick. And I show up with literally the documents that it says, like my, you know, my university records and my passport and like this one thin job offer. And this guy's like, this company's trying to scam you. And he like gave me all of this material about like protecting myself and how to make sure I was being paid enough and all of this sort of thing. And he was just so shocked that anyone would actually sort of do it DIY, I guess. But I think it's so normal now. But
it's I mean, probably most people here are on scammy 2-page kind of application.
Mail order programmer.
3Jam actually, I looked on their LinkedIn profile, 3 people still work there, so it's still going. I thought
it actually sort of got stealthy acquired, so I think they're
really?
just like not, they're not
something.
talking about it, yeah.
And then Friendster, and Friendster still has a landing page. I thought that was interesting. So, I mean, was that the pinnacle of social networks, right? 2008, 2007, that was, I guess, Facebook as well.
So the context for this was, firstly, 3Jam was running out of money and I had 10 days to find a new job. So that's part one. And part two is that I knew I wanted to start a company, so I didn't want to like jump into anything that was too actually meaty. But the thing that was actually really interesting about it was actually a really worthwhile job. Is so Facebook had won at this point everywhere else but Southeast Asia. And so if you went to the Philippines at this time in 2008, no one knew what Facebook was, and everyone knew what Friendster was, and everyone used Friendster on a daily basis.
And on mobile, right?
On mobile exclusively. And same with Indonesia, same with Singapore. Singapore was starting to change a little bit, and then Malaysia as well. And so, and the interesting thing about those countries is they're also very mobile heavy, right? Everything was through their phone. And so, because I had this telco background, I basically went and did these deals with the telcos to do these rev share data plans, so you basically got access to Friendster only for like a bucket price, you know, so it's paid for a day of Friendster usage.
Yeah.
Which at the time was this sort of very radical, oh my god, you go and deal with...
Because Facebook went around to do that only a couple of years ago,
right.
so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was actually, you know, it's pretty cool. I like went and did a whole bunch of like user research in Manila, and like, you know, it was actually really interesting. It's actually been very helpful since, but I wasn't in the job for very long. So,
and then you met Ben, or you knew Ben from Telstra. Is that how did you meet your co-founder at the time?
No, so it's actually the weirdest story. So I was at Telstra in the Chief Technology Office, and my job was to sort of determine strategy for what the mobile landscape was going to look like in 5 to 10 years. And so this was back pre-iPhone, like, you know, everyone had a Nokia phone at this time, like really pre-smartphone. There's sort of a couple of Blackberries, but nothing serious, right? And it was back in the days where to write an app for a mobile phone, it was J2ME, and every single operating system had a very slightly different version of the JSR, like different application programming interfaces that Java specified. And so as a developer, you used to have to like hire a ton of, you know, grunt work engineers to do porting. So you'd sort of make it work for the, you know, for one phone, and then you have to port it to the next one, and port it to the next one, and port it to the next one. And it was extremely expensive, and like testing this was impossible. I mean, it's like really difficult. And so I was sort of inside Telstra saying, this is a big problem. Like if developers can't write apps for phones, in a scalable way, then there's not going to be good apps, and then no one's going to want to use data, and this whole ecosystem is going to work. And so I was sort of internally pitching in Telstra that we needed to do this sort of app store thing, although I wasn't calling it an app store, where you basically would write once and it would build across all phones, and that you needed to have some discovery, you needed to have like a store that you could go and find all these apps, and you needed to have integrated billing and all of this stuff. And at the time there was this startup in Sydney called Blue Pulse, which was Ben's first startup. Then that's actually what they did in the early days, is that they basically built this wrapper for every Java phone, and you could just write little widgets that would run inside this wrapper. And so I'm at Telstra saying, hey, look, there's this startup, and I didn't know Ben at the time, there's this startup by this guy, and we should go and acquire them and turn this into our app store strategy. And everyone was like, oh, this is a very crazy idea that you have. And then the iPhone launched, and then I gave up and left. And it turned out that at the same time, Ben had raised money, and at the time also none of the VCs believed in this app store strategy either. And so he had pivoted his company to be a social networking company. Not social networking, sorry, the messaging company. And I was now at 3Jam, which was a messaging company. And so now we were sort of competitors directly. Like people, used to think of Blue Pulse and 3Jam as sort of these direct competitors actually. And so we sort of met through that, and I was like, oh my god, I pitched to a startup, that we should acquire a startup and all of this sort of thing. And our relationship at first was I wouldn't say antagonistic, but it was definitely oh, you're the competition and I can't trust you very much. And then I started hanging out with his wife a lot because she is awesome. And we started working out together because we actually only lived a few blocks away from each other. We both wanted workout buddy to keep you motivated. And he always used to be sort of mad about this because he's like, why are you working out with the competition? But anyway, then we sort of got, to be pretty friendly, and I left 3Jam, and he ended up exiting from Blue Pulse, and, we got talking, and the timing was right, and I think we had complementary skill sets, so.
And why Chomp? What was the kind of branding and the identity rationale behind that?
And so, so we've both been in mobile for a long time. And we've both been thinking about apps for a long time. And I think both of us were like, oh my god, the iPhone's happening. It's finally here, right? This thing that we've been wanting to happen for ages is finally here. And so we were both definitely wanting to do something in that space. And it was right about the time, in the very early days of the iPhone, you had apps like Bump. And it was literally, there was so few...
Business cards.
There were so few good apps that an Urban Spoon had that filter feature where you shook it and it give you a random restaurant sort of thing. There were so few good apps that sort of it just spread by word of mouth or top charts. People would just check the top charts each day to see what the good apps were. And there was this switch happening from that being scalable to there being just enough good apps in the world that that's not how you were going to find your apps anymore. And so we sort of saw this big opportunity around, well, we know that people are having difficulty, consumers are having difficulty finding good apps, and developers are having difficulty getting their apps found by the right people, and so let's just go and try and solve that problem in some way. And we tried a few different solutions initially, and it ended up being search, and a fundamentally new different type of search was the big thing that was going to solve this. So that's what we ended up doing.
And we kind of we're going to take a chomp out of Apple's market
No.
share. Is that the kind of...
You know how we came up with the name?
No.
This is a good story as well. We had come up with this very dumb name, which was Yapdoor, because we decided that it was going to have the word app in it somewhere.
Yeah.
And we had raised this seed money from, among other people, SC Angel. And we were
Ashton Kutcher and it was definitely A-list, right?
Well, so we're at Ron Conway's suite at the San Francisco Giants, and he looks at us and he's like, your name is really bad. And we're like, that's fair. And he's like, we just gave you money, you should go and buy a URL. And it turned out that like they had like some connection to these URL scrollers who like literally this is what they do is they just sell URLs for a bunch of money. And so we literally sat at this baseball game and scrolled through this list of URLs, and we were like, oh, that's an English word, it's 5 letters. And that was the level of thought that we were taking. Don't use that as an English strategy.
And so you worked on it about, was it 2-3 years in total? What was the kind of the most challenging thing, and is there any you kind of wish that you would have done differently? Obviously, we're going to talk about the massive exit to Apple, so that's a great result. But was there any you kind of think at the time that was kind of challenging and you would have changed with the experience?
I think I still sort of think that there probably was a big app company to be built, and it turns out that actually no one's really built one. And I don't know that now I would go and start an app company. And so I don't know how to reconcile those two things, right? That I do actually believe that there was a big app company to be built, and yet none has been built, and now I don't think one could be. But I sort of still, I don't know, it's a very vague sort of regret that maybe if we'd done some things differently or thought about things differently, but maybe that's just me like holding on to the past a little bit. Maybe it's just there was no big app company to be built, and it turns out the web basically won.
Think about how many platforms now as well. Like there is no centralized discovery, right?
But I don't know how important that is either. It's sort of because
fundamentally,
exactly.
Like, probably 2 or 3 years ago, most people in here would have been a mobile app founder, and now it's quite rare to see apps getting all the funding.
Yeah, I sort of feel like in a way the web has won, and I don't know why that. It's still this very nebulous state of the world where, like, if you're still going to use something every day, you've probably got your banking app on your phone, and you've probably got Facebook, and you've got, hyper customized apps for your like email and calendar and that sort of thing. But it's not like the average user is using, 50 apps a week sort of thing.
I barely get me on the homepage.
Yeah.
Really.
So I don't know. It's a weird state of the world that we're in. I think in 10 years it'll look different.
And I know Apple notoriously tight-lipped, so we can't talk about as much as we'd wanted, but how did that kind of M&A happen? Did they come knocking on the door? What can you kind of share about that whole acquisition experience?
Yeah, so I can't share too much, but that was definitely one that we were completely clueless about. And it's definitely Apple's acquisition strategy to not tell you that they're betting you for acquisition until like right at the last minute. And so we the whole time were like, oh, we're looking at Apple, that's so cool, I might partner with Apple, that'd be great. And and it was only like right at the last minute they were like, oh, that's what's going on here. So it was definitely different between the first one and the second one. I knew a lot more the second time around, but it was these stealthy. You made it sound like I knew what I was doing, and that it was all very deliberate, but it wasn't. Basically.
I mean, is it because that's something a lot of people talk about? Exits, investors will go, when you're going to exit, but it's almost like you can't control those things. There's steps you can take, but if you're going to get acquired, there's a lot of things that need to get in that allow you to be acquirable.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. We were not looking to get acquired. It was not something we were strategically like, oh, let's have a board meeting and now let's decide to go and be acquired. It was more something that like the offer came along, we talked about it for a long time and decided it was the right thing to do for a variety of reasons. And I think you definitely can go and shop a company, right? Like I've been on the receiving end of people shopping companies, and it's possible, but it's definitely harder than when serendipity just happens and it's, there's the right fit on both sides.
And I mean, I've had people do this to me, but it's always like, how do you know, I don't know if you were fielding other partnerships or kind of offers, but how do you know when they're just time wasters or they're just kind of, scoping ideas versus when they're kind of serious? I know we can get into the second time around, but, is there a kind of tips for a founder when you're like, this is going to actually be fruitful, or is this a waste of your time?
So I must admit, I've never really been too much on the receiving side of that. So at Chomp, as I say, like we sort of didn't know that it was happening until it was happening, and then then we were like, oh, I guess we should go talk to some other companies just to see, and so that was a very like deliberate, and then it was like us saying, no, you have like X days to get back to us. So there was sort of messing around at that stage. And then with the second one, it was a very different sort of process where it was very driven by me. So I don't know that I've been on that end of things. And in general, like the M&A teams that I know are pretty good actually about not just doing it for like competitive intelligence or just doing it for, sort of nefarious reasons. But I'm sure it does happen. I just don't have a experience with it.
Yeah. And then you went, I think, I don't know how much you talk about what you worked on, but you went to work at Apple Maps, right? That was like a time, I don't know if people remember Mapgate. Yeah. So was that kind of like an interesting time to be working on the Map product and moving on to working on many other kind of departments as well as Apple?
So I actually started off, I ran search for their iTunes store, which means like not just iTunes, but the App Store and iBooks and podcasts and iTunes U and all of this sort of miscellaneous stuff that they have. And so I was sort of there doing that, and they had this internal map thing, and at Apple you're supposed to try it all out. And I just like, every year it's in September, the big launch event, and in August I had gone on this trip to France, and I had taken my corporate phone that had this pre-release map on it, and it was a debacle, because at the time you couldn't download Google Maps, right, because Google Maps didn't know that Apple Maps was gonna, so they hadn't built their own app, and I mean, you just couldn't.
Weren't people like driving off bridges and things?
I mean, I did not drive off any bridges, but I mean, like literally the road, I'd be like, let's turn down here, and there would not be no road, or, I mean, it was so bad, and so I came back and I was like, guys, like, what are we doing? And everyone was like, no, it's going to be fine. And then obviously it wasn't fine, and then somehow I got drafted into the, like, fix-it team, and so then I ran search for maps, and then after that I, like, had to sort of, Apple is a fantastic company, but it definitely has its blind spots around this sort of more algorithmic side of things. And so a lot of what I ended up doing was just sort of putting in place the basics around, like, this is how you think of the quality of a complex data-driven algorithmic system like a map. This is how you, like, ship changes to that and know that you're not breaking a bunch of stuff and, like, those sorts of things. So it, I don't know, it ended up, I hope it helped. I don't know, anyone uses Apple Maps anymore and thinks it's better, but I think it's a bit better.
I think it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Just on that, when you said you went to France, did you ever do a painting? Was that? Because it's like Paul Graham's Hackers and Painters. You're literally the hacker and painter.
No, I mean, after I left Apple, I went and lived in Paris I went around Europe for a little while, and then I went and lived in Paris for a couple of months, just because, like, why not?
Yeah.
I did paint. I wouldn't call myself a painter.
Well, you should be a painter. Because that was one of my questions around, after you have such a great acquisition, what is it like in life? Like, why not just kind of chill back and, enjoy it? Like, what does it kind of feel like to go through that process? Does it even sink in?
So, I don't know. I think this is all highly individual. Yeah. For me, I think the question that you're asking is about money, and I'm not a very money-driven person, so it sort of doesn't impact me very much. And, like, life would be pretty boring. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't get up and go to work each day because I'm like, yes, I'm going to make some money today. I'm sort of driven in other ways. So, for me, it was more, so for me, actually, like, the logical thing to do, if you're just being purely, like, rational about, the economics and your life happiness and that sort of thing, is after you've been acquired, it's just sort of really chill out, right? Like have really great work-life balance, and like schedule all your doctor's appointments in the middle of the day, and like, you know, go and get your teeth done or whatever. They're best company now than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's still not, you know, like, no one's like, yes, let's invest in this Australian-based company, you know?
Yeah. Have you done any angel investments? Is that something that you're kind of thinking of, or?
I haven't really. I don't have a lot of time and don't necessarily trust my instincts. So I'm sort of like
Trust the data.
yeah. I don't know. I also feel like you have to meet with a lot of people and then you have to let them down, and I just go to work and then I come home.
Is there anything else you kind of want to talk about before we throw it open to Q&A? I think the final question then is like, what are you kind of excited about from tech? Because obviously you're working on a lot of future tech things. What are you kind of thinking about day to day, or where do you think the opportunity is going?
I mean, what I'm personally really excited about is I think that the way that people consume information is sort of going to fundamentally change over the next 10 years. Like in terms of, you know, search has been dominant for 15 years now, and I think search will continue to be big, but it's going to evolve, and then you get, you know, obviously the bet Google's making with Assistant, and, you know, Amazon's making with the Echo and this sort of thing. I mean, it's all very nascent and that sort of thing right now, but I think we're going to see the way that people engage with information online is going to change, and I think that's going to be really interesting and exciting. So, yeah, and then the other thing is just like, you know, I mean, this is not a new idea, but the massive leapfrogging to like mobile-only experiences in developing countries. You know, you're really seeing like India get to the point now where like the average, bandwidth, like data costs are coming down enough so that they can actually like, and like speeds are getting up enough that they can actually like have a decent experience and be like a massive market for you, and like similarly with Indonesia and this sort of thing. So, you know, Brazil, and like I think there's huge opportunities to look outside of this like traditionally.
Yeah. It's funny how each part of your background has like played into the future. You could even kind of orchestrate it in better. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'd love to kind of hear if anyone's got questions for Cathy. Okay, there we go. Straight away.
Hey. So from your view in, say, Google famously done a bunch of moonshots over the last couple of years. It doesn't seem like any of them have worked out yet. And I was wondering, from your perspective, do you think Google will keep attempting them? Do you think the concept has failed? Do you think that it will work out? What's your picture on that at the moment?
So I've only been there 6 months and I've been pretty heads down, so I don't think I necessarily have the best view on this. I will say that Google is culturally and organizationally set up to continue making these sorts of big bets. I don't think they're going to go away. But I don't even know if I agree with you about whether or not they failed or not. I don't have enough information, and I don't know if they have, why they have. But I definitely think that that's something that Google's going to continue to do. And I think it's one of the great things about the company in many ways is this very bottom up.
Well, that's why it's Alphabet now. Like,
yeah.
There's been a lot of, let's say, fear in recent months in terms of like what the potential for machine learning and AI has brought. Some notable figures, for example, Woz actually came out and said, well, I'm kind of scared as to what's going to be happening in the world, and there's actually, going back to it, which is maybe understandable, in terms of saying, well, AI isn't going to take over and this awareness is going to kill us all. But Undecidable Labs, as far as I've read, was centered in some machine learning based approaches for image recognition and so on. And Google is one of the companies that has a lot of talent, that is putting a lot of effort into machine learning. The Google Brain project is one of the big highlights, I think, and also contributes to OpenAI and all that sort of stuff. From your perspective, what is your perspective on machine learning and where things are going, and both from your involvement in it and what you see as the future of it, both within Google and from also your perspective on working in this space?
So firstly, I think it's really telling that all the people who are freaking out about AI taking over the world are not actually AI or machine learning people. Like literally, if you're an AI or you're a machine learning person, you're like, do you understand how dumb these things are? Like in reality, like there's no way that this is ever happening anytime soon. I mean, it's like we have to do so much work just to get it to do the one simple thing that a 2-year-old can do, and it's so custom for that one thing, and then you change the task even a little bit and it can't do it anymore. Like the idea of it being actually intelligent, it's insane to me, honestly. Like maybe we can talk about this in 100 years, sort of thing. The bigger problem I actually see, or the bigger worry I have about machine learning is these models, these statistical models are notoriously opaque and hard to interpret. And I think there is this real issue. I actually almost started a company around this instead of starting Undecidable Labs. A real issue about algorithmic bias. That because of a number of reasons, you can actually encode biased treatment against certain individuals or protected classes or whatever, in your machine learning algorithms, not know about it at all, and then sort of think, oh, this product is based on an algorithm, so therefore it's very objective and true and fine, and actually it's not at all. Like, there's this...
It was the monkey thing.
No, that's not even... What I'm more worried about is... So there's a company that's out selling a predictor for recidivism in prisoners, right? Like what's the likelihood that this one prisoner is going to reoffend? And so this is actively used by courts in America. The judge will get the parole, at the parole hearing, will run this algorithm and it'll say this prisoner is X% likely to reoffend. And they'll use that in their, decision to grant parole or not. And that I just think has just such potential for, issues because literally no one has done any QA on that to check that, say, if you took a white prisoner with the exact same characteristics as a black prisoner and put them into the algorithm, whether or not they'd come out the same. Do you know what I mean? Or, credit score models or those sorts of things, you see actually massive bias inherent in them, and I think it's something that the machine learning community is just starting to grapple with.
Yeah. So there's a few people that will talk about what's like to fundraise and how you kick that off and so on. Can you talk a little bit about what's it like to kick off an M&A process? How do you as a founder go and get that very first conversation going?
You have to know who the M&A people are. So that means that means you have to have, it's kind of the same as fundraising, you have to go and get an introduction to all of them. And then you sort of go in and say, it's actually very similar to fundraising. And then you can go in and say, this is what I've got, and this is the tech, these are the people, these are the skill sets, blah, 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 and, this is how much we've raised, this is what the cap table looks like, and, if you really like going out to do it, you, do that, and then sort of have a conversation about where that could fit, and...
Would you say it's like dating?
It's a bit... Well, maybe not the way, I don't know.
Do that.
Do you want to take it on the first day or the second one?
Yeah. When you reveal your cap table.
Any other questions? Okay.
You made a passing comment that you think in the next 10 years the whole mobile app world is going to be completely different. What's your view on the future in that regard?
So I don't know what the future is going to be. The reason that I said that, I know it's very frustrating, I wish I did. The reason I said that is that right now if you start a company, you have to build a desktop website, a mobile website, an iOS app, possibly an iPad app, an Android app, and
Tablet.
that and
Watch TV.
and maybe if you're really hardcore, watch MTV. And it's like too much. Like the average startup is spending way too many engineering cycles on just the UI layer right now, and it's not just the startups, right? Like, God, at Google, we think about this, and at Apple, we thought about this, and like, it just is unsustainable. I think that the industry requires this many UIs, right? So I just have a belief that somehow this is going to resolve. I just don't know how.
Well, I think in terms of tech, it's becoming so easy to build sites now that we'll just dictate whatever we want to build in the future. Be like, build me this app, build me that. Down the back.
Yeah, I'm not Australian, but I'm here anyway.
You're that
I'm here. I'm an Australian person. I was just wondering, in terms of the work you're doing for Google in image search, what are the compelling things you're focusing on besides AI in terms of acquiring and exploiting users as an MVP project for Google?
I think, so the interesting thing about the developing world is that it's actually, for a variety of reasons, far more visual than, the English-speaking developed world. It's a combination of like, there's just not as much text web content out there in that in those languages. There's lower literacy rates. There's less familiarity with the like classic search engine, results page, 10 blue links, which if you think about it is actually not a very natural way of consuming information. And we've all just got used to it, but if you are sort of using it for the first time, you want to see some pictures, you want to see some videos, and that sort of thing. So I think image search in general, I think has a lot to offer in terms of growth in the developing world, and we're still sort of, I don't know, haven't been there that long, but we're trying to figure it out.
In a similar vein, what are your views on personalisation of search and how you balance that fine line between providing utility and creeping users out?
Yeah, this is a really complicated topic. And to be clear, I'm definitely not speaking for Google in this capacity. I think, actually most of the time users aren't creeped out if you're actually doing things well. The bigger risk is actually the filter bubble effect, right? That you can, get to the point where users are just...
Yeah. Much better.
Get to the point where you're only showing users one particular view on the world, and maybe a view that only confirms their existing beliefs. And so I think you have to be careful about how much you personalize and how much you kind of let people go down into that bubble.
Right, we'll do one last question and then kick it off. Yeah, right down the back.
Cathy, thanks for the talk, very good. One question you mentioned, money doesn't really motivate you a lot. So what wakes you up? What motivates you? What's your really driving force now?
Well, my 19-month-old wakes me up every day. That's my main problem.
What gets you to work? Yeah.
I am really excited by impact, and so one of the great things about both Apple and Google is that I've worked on products that have literally hundreds of millions of daily active users globally, which is it's pretty tough to have that sort of impact at other places. And I really think that there's a big opportunity to do something pretty exciting with image search as a platform. So that's why I get up every morning.
That's awesome. Right, well everyone join me in thanking Cathy.